Veronica. I was 29 when my mother used me like a ladder and kicked it away the moment she reached the top. When people talk about betrayal, they often think about lovers, best friends, maybe business partners, but no one warns you about what it feels like when the person who betrays you is the same woman who once taught you how to walk, how to braid your hair, how to stay strong in a tough world. No one warns you how much it breaks something inside you when your own mother decides you are disposable. I had been living in Phoenix, Arizona, working a dead-end job at a hotel front desk, making just enough to cover rent, when my mother called me one afternoon and offered what felt like a second chance. She ran a mid-sized real estate and property management business based in Scottsdale, Sutter Estates, and Developments. I had never shown any real interest in her industry, but she said something that pierced through me. She said she saw herself in me, that she believed I could do more, that I had the drive she once had at my age. For the first time in a long while, I felt recognized. I left my apartment, packed my car, and moved in with her the next week. In the beginning, everything felt like a dream. I soaked up everything: property law, client negotiations, short-term rental operations, contract writing, even how to flip houses and calculate market risk. Within 6 months, I became her go-to for every major client. I rewrote our lease templates, optimized the client onboarding system, and handled the toughest landlords with calm professionalism. I personally closed deals that tripled our monthly revenue. I networked relentlessly, even outside of business hours, at Chamber of Commerce events and investment forums. The name Sutter Estates started turning heads not just in Scottsdale, but in Tempe and Mesa too. We had no competition. We were the competition. By the end of that first year, I was the highest performing employee in the company. My mom rewarded me with bonuses and said I would be her successor one day. She joked that I should buy the company from her when she retired. I believed her. I really did. I had my own office, my own clients. My name was on the lips of developers and brokers all across Maricopa County. I thought I had found the place where I would grow roots for the rest of my life. And then, without a whisper of warning, the world beneath me collapsed. I was sitting at my desk, preparing paperwork for a commercial property deal when I tried to log into our internal system. Access denied. I thought it was a software glitch, so I called IT, no response. I shrugged it off and went to process payroll. Same result. I checked my company email. It was deactivated. I still thought it was some mistake until I got a call from one of our leasing partners telling me that my company account had been flagged as inactive. I rushed to check my bank account, only to find it frozen. Everything I had earned, everything I had worked for, every commission, every deposit, gone. I called the bank. They said the account had been flagged by the company's financial administrator, my mother. I called her immediately. No answer. I texted, I emailed, I waited. An hour turned into 5, then a day, then 3. She did not pick up, did not write back, did not even send a single word to explain. It felt like watching someone you love slowly disappear into fog while you're chained in place, screaming with no sound. On the 4th day, I drove to her house. No lights, no car, no one home. I stood there on her porch like a stranger. I tried to stay calm, thinking she must be having some kind of breakdown, or maybe she needed space. But when I returned to my apartment, I received a notification from the HR platform we used. My employment had been terminated. No explanation, just a termination date, retroactive to the day before my system access was revoked. I sat on my floor and stared at the screen in disbelief, as if looking hard enough would force the truth to surface. But the truth had already arrived. It was silent and sharp. I had been fired, cut off, erased. She never even said goodbye. In the weeks that followed, I tried to pick up the pieces. I contacted former clients, hoping to start my own consultancy. Some were apologetic, others were cold. A few said they had been informed that I was under legal review, and they preferred not to be involved. That was when I realized this had been planned. She had not just removed me, she had replaced me. The entire training I had led for our newest hires had essentially built up a mirror of myself, a cost-effective, eager-to-please version of me who would never question authority, never expect a share of equity, never be a threat. I checked every legal record I could access. My mother had quietly rerouted every financial stream connected to my name, locked me out of joint accounts, and restructured the company so that I no longer had any traceable value within it. I had become a ghost in a building I helped erect. She had kicked me out like a dog once the loyalty and labor were no longer needed. And the worst part was how methodical it had been. There was no anger in her actions, just cold, clean erasure, like deleting a file from your desktop because the hard drive needs room for something new. I paced my living room that night for hours. My hands shook, my throat burned, rage settled into my bones like lead. I had been more than just a good daughter. I had been the engine that pulled her company into the spotlight. And she had used me, drained me, and discarded me. I knew I could not let this end like that. Not with silence. Not with shame. I was going to take back what belonged to me. Piece by piece, dollar by dollar, legacy by legacy. I was not going to scream or beg or fall apart. I was going to build something even she could not touch. And in doing so, I would make sure the world knew exactly who built Sutter Estates. I would become her competition, and I would bury her with my success. Update 1. The hardest part was not filing the lawsuit. The hardest part was convincing myself that I had the right to do it, that I was not being petty or emotional or acting out of vengeance, that this was justice. I had spent over a year building that company's foundation with my hands, my nights, my ideas. I had earned every dollar in those accounts and every client that came through those doors. And I knew my mother had not just fired me, she had strategically erased me. I was not going to walk away in shame. I was going to walk into that courtroom with my head high and every receipt in hand. I started gathering everything. Emails showing my responsibilities, growing month by month. Screenshots of systems I had built. Records of lease templates and investor packages I had created from scratch. I went through archived internal reports where my name appeared in deal pipelines, training logs, onboarding documentation. I even found recordings from Zoom meetings where my mother had praised me in front of the team, calling me irreplaceable, her right hand. And, most importantly, I had the original contract she made me sign when she first offered me the job, which gave me a small but significant share of deferred profit participation, one that had mysteriously vanished from later paperwork, but had never been officially nullified. I brought all of this to a labor and corporate lawyer in downtown Phoenix who had handled similar cases for startup founders pushed out by bigger partners. She listened quietly, flipping through the folders without much expression until she reached the asset and profit participation clause. She stopped, looked up, and asked me a simple question. Had the company ever paid out according to this clause? I told her no, not a single dollar. She nodded slowly and told me we had a real case. Not just wrongful termination, but breach of contract, violation of fiduciary trust, and unjust enrichment. We filed suit in Maricopa County Superior Court 2 weeks later. The paperwork was thick. I attached every piece of evidence. The suit alleged that I was not only a foundational employee, but had been promised partial ownership through profit sharing, and that my dismissal was engineered to prevent those earnings from being realized. The company's legal team received the documents, and I waited for the response. My mother never called. Instead, her assistant filed a boilerplate denial and informed the court that a company representative, her newly promoted deputy director, would appear in her place. That was the first sign that she underestimated me. She assumed I was just acting out, and that I would crumble the moment I was in front of lawyers and authority. What she did not know was that I had prepared for every scenario. I had gone over every detail of the suit with my attorney for weeks. I had learned every line in the original contract, anticipated every defense they might use, and documented every policy and procedure I had implemented myself. I knew this company better than anyone else alive, including her. The hearing was held in a downtown Phoenix courthouse under pale lights and cold marble. Her deputy, a man named David, with a too-tight tie and the look of someone who relied on bluff and jargon, sat across from me with 2 lawyers who whispered to him after every question. But I did not flinch. I explained, calmly and clearly, how I had been brought in, how my position grew, how my intellectual and operational labor scaled the business, and how I was rewarded by being removed once I was no longer useful. My attorney walked the judge through the contract clauses, the timeline of events, and the financial documents we had subpoenaed showing that revenue had tripled during my tenure, and that I had not seen a dime from the profit-sharing agreement. David, visibly nervous, tried to object, but his defense was built on assumption. He claimed I had no formal ownership. My lawyer presented internal company messages acknowledging my future stake. He said I had no proof of damages. My lawyer showed screenshots of bank transactions being cut off the day I was removed, despite invoices still pending. He said the company had every right to restructure. My lawyer countered with the fact that I had not been notified, and that the company's own HR system listed me as terminated due to redundancy, despite multiple open positions still listed at the time. The judge asked for both sides to submit a closing summary within a week. I felt calm leaving the courthouse, but I knew David did not. He was sweating through his collar and tapping his phone the moment he stepped outside. I knew that call was going to my mother. I did not expect what came next. 3 days after the hearing, I received a call, not from my lawyer, not from the court, but from one of my former co-workers, a friend who still worked under David. She was breathless. She told me that David had walked into the main office that morning, white as a sheet, after a phone call with my mother. She had apparently yelled at him over speakerphone in a locked conference room. But then the real news came. The judge had ruled in my favor, but more than that, he had found that my contract entitled me not only to financial damages, but that my deferred profit participation clause gave me the legal right to claim partial ownership of the company. And because my mother had failed to appear personally, and because her legal team had not disputed the clause with sufficient evidence, the court had issued a temporary management injunction. Effective immediately, the ownership portion of the company relating to that clause was placed under my legal control pending full transfer. In simple terms, I had taken control of the company. David had no choice but to comply. The judge's order was final. The court had ruled that the company's financial practices during my termination were deceptive and retaliatory, and that I had legal stake not just in the past profits, but in the company as it stood today. When my mother finally called me, it was not to explain, apologize, or reason. It was only to ask one thing, how I could do this to her. But I did not pick up. I watched her name light up my phone screen and fade away again and again as I sat in the office that used to be hers. It was over. I had taken everything back, and now it was mine. Update 2. The first call came at 11:07 p.m. I saw her name flash across my phone screen, not as Mom, but by her full name, Linda Sutter. I had changed the contact the day the judge's ruling was finalized. I knew what this was going to be. I let it ring out. The second call came 2 minutes later, then a third, then a fourth. On the fifth call, I picked up. Her voice came through like a hurricane, angry and shrill, not with grief, but with entitlement. She demanded to know what I had done, how I dared to humiliate her, how I could live with myself. I said nothing. I did not need to. I simply ended the call mid-sentence and added her number to my blocked list. The silence that followed was heavier than any screaming could have been. The next morning, I dressed carefully, a dark gray blazer, soft cream blouse, black pants. I wanted to look neither vengeful nor forgiving, just clean, controlled, and untouchable. I drove to the office in Scottsdale, where I used to park in the back, near the delivery gate. That morning, I pulled into the executive slot in front. My name was not on the plaque yet, but that was only a matter of time. I approached the glass doors where, for the past year, I had to flash a security badge to gain access. The badge had been deactivated when I was terminated, and I half expected the same rejection. But the security guard, a young man named Carlos, who used to greet me daily, stood and nodded. He opened the door manually and welcomed me in with a quiet smile. I stepped into the lobby, and it felt like I was stepping into my own story again, not as a character, but as the author. The whispers started almost immediately. Employees who had been told I was taking a break or moved on stared with wide eyes as I made my way past reception. The elevator dinged open. I took it to the third floor, where the executive suites were. I had not seen that hallway since the day I was locked out of the system. The same art still hung on the walls. The same soft beige carpeting dulled every footstep, but it all felt smaller now. David was already waiting. He stood awkwardly outside the main conference room, clutching a manila folder and looking like he had not slept. He offered some nervous greeting, but I walked past him. I did not have to explain anything. He knew. My new office was my mother's former office. It still had the dark wood desk she had imported from New York, still had her framed awards on the wall, her monogrammed leather blotter, her marble pen holder. All of it would be removed by the end of the week, but I let it sit there that morning. I wanted her to see what she had given away. And she did. An hour later, I heard a commotion in the lobby, raised voices, slamming doors. Then David appeared again, knocking once before opening the door. Behind him stood Linda. She pushed past him and stormed into the room, eyes blazing, cheeks flushed. I stood up slowly, watching her like one might watch a stranger losing their temper in public. She screamed that this was her company, that I had stolen everything, that the judge had no right, that I was just an ungrateful little thief. She gestured around the office, as if the furniture itself would rise in defense of her authority. She demanded that I get out of her building. I let her scream. I waited. Then I turned to David and calmly informed him that, effective immediately, she was banned from the premises and that her access was revoked. His mouth fell open. My mother's words caught mid-breath. I handed him a signed directive I had prepared the night before, stating that she was no longer permitted on company grounds under any capacity, and that her title, privileges, and authorizations were null. Then I told him he was done too. I explained that his failure to provide transparency to the court, his manipulation of internal reports, and his compliance in removing me under false pretenses made him complicit. His employment was terminated, effective immediately. Security would escort both of them off the premises. He stammered something about loyalty, about only doing what she told him to do. I stared at him until he went silent. Loyalty built on silence in the face of corruption was not a defense. It was cowardice. And I had no room for cowards in my company. My mother looked around the room again, but this time with panic. Not a single face in the hallway showed sympathy. No one rushed to her defense. No one tried to calm me down, because they all knew they had seen what I built. They had worked with me. They had watched her let me go like a defective part and then vanish without explanation. Now they saw the balance reset. Security came. Linda resisted at first, yelling more, but there was no power in her words anymore. They were just sounds. I watched her disappear down the hallway, flanked by silence and the echo of her own downfall. David followed, deflated, dragging his briefcase like it weighed 1,000 pounds. And just like that, the last trace of her authority vanished from the building she once ruled like a queen. I stood by the window of her former office and looked down at the courtyard where employees were gathering for lunch. Some glanced up. One of them raised a coffee cup toward me with a knowing grin. I left no one to pity her, not because I wanted vengeance, but because she earned the silence. She had orchestrated my disappearance like a business move, clean and calculated. I returned the favor. Only I did not just erase her. I replaced her. Update 3. It still feels surreal to think about how something that started with a call for help ended with me owning the very thing that tried to erase me. When my mother first asked me to join her company, I had never imagined anything more than a chance to build something together, to earn my place and grow under her guidance. I had no grand visions of taking over. I did not crave power. All I wanted was a fair stake in what I helped create, a piece of what I had poured my heart and time into. But the moment she decided I was expendable, the course of both our lives split for good. After I officially took control of the company, things moved fast. I spent the first month quietly reorganizing everything. I reviewed every department, every client contract, every payment structure. I replaced toxic managers who had covered for her schemes with newer, more transparent hires. I brought in a financial auditor to investigate the tangled web of bonuses and internal funding she had used to keep certain people loyal. Several team leaders turned over within weeks, choosing to resign rather than be questioned. And yet, the rest of the company began to breathe again. People started smiling in the hallways. Meetings ended with real solutions. New partnerships formed. Clients returned. For the first time in over a year, the company was not running on fear or manipulation. It was running on merit. I had never planned to take it all. That is what most people still do not understand. My lawsuit had been about restoring what was rightfully mine. I only wanted my compensation, my share, the dignity I was denied when she kicked me out without a word. But her refusal to acknowledge the damage, her decision to ignore the court, and her arrogant belief that I could never win, that is what handed everything to me. She thought she was playing chess against a pawn. She did not realize I had been studying the whole board from the beginning. After she was escorted out of the building, my mother tried to fight back in the press. She gave a local interview, attempting to paint me as a rogue employee who manipulated the legal system, but it backfired spectacularly. One of the journalists fact-checked her story and uncovered internal emails that contradicted her claims. Then another outlet picked up the story and ran a feature on women in business being sabotaged by family dynamics. Instead of saving her reputation, she ended up becoming a cautionary tale. She tried to start a new business under a different name, but she lacked the network, the goodwill, and most importantly, the trust. Vendors she had worked with for years refused to partner with her again. Former clients who had once praised her turned cold. And those she counted on to support her found it difficult to stand next to someone whose own daughter had taken her company with a court ruling and a mountain of evidence. The illusion of her dominance crumbled. As for me, I kept building. I rebranded the company. I changed the name from Sutter Estates to something new, something that reflected not just me, but the vision I had always had. It became Viridia Partners, a real estate and investment firm rooted in ethics, strategy, and transparency. I kept the office in Scottsdale but opened a second branch in Austin, Texas, then a third one in San Diego. My former colleagues who stayed with me were promoted and rewarded. I created a scholarship fund for young women entering real estate law and finance. I launched a mentorship program for first-generation professionals. I made sure that the success I built did not only benefit me, but everyone around me. My personal life shifted too. I no longer looked for validation from people who withheld love like a currency. I surrounded myself with people who respected boundaries, who valued effort, who did not need blood to feel loyalty. And with time, the wounds began to heal. Not because she ever apologized. She never did. Not once. She disappeared from my life as quietly as she had once removed me from hers. No calls, no letters, no effort to reconcile. But I no longer needed her voice to tell me I was enough. I had proven it on my own. The irony is that in trying to strip me of everything, she gave me far more than she ever intended. She gave me the chance to step into my own power, to see myself not as her shadow, but as my own force. She handed me the opportunity to rise, because she tried to knock me down. And when the dust settled, she was the one left in silence, Not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. She lost the crown, and I never looked back.